Heavenly Father, we come to you tonight with the intention of honoring and lifting up the voices of the women that you have created. We thank you for the time and the activism and the research and the effort and the energy put in by these amazing women who are speakers tonight. And we ask that you give us a spirit of empathy to approach this subject with. And in your name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Right. So we're going to start by having you guys introduce yourself. And with your introduction, please tell us what your favorite act of microfeminism is.
Ooh. Got to think about that for a second.
So what is, I've only ever done macrofeminism. What is microfeminism?
So microfeminism is like something you do on the day-to-day basis that is inherently feminist. So a choice that you make to put women on, like to raise them up.
I feel like literally right now I am growing my daughters. That is my main form of microfeminism in the day-to-day right now. But I guess I'll go ahead and introduce myself. So my name is Maria Oswalt. I am the creative director of an organization called Rehumanize International. We are a consistent life ethic organization. So we talk about all of the life issues from womb to tomb, so from conception to natural death. We talk about abortion, the death penalty, euthanasia and assisted suicide, embryonic stem cell research, kind of the whole host of life issues, just seeking to create a culture that values the dignity of human beings at every stage of life. Yeah.
Awesome. Jacqueline, do you want to go next?
Sure. So yeah, I'm Jacqueline Abernathy, and I am, well, a pro-life academic, former professor, current consultant, and I have basically been in the pro-life movement working to protect some human beings from womb to tomb since college, since I was where you guys are now. So that's where it all started, and it can stop, but it shouldn't. It should keep going. I just got an affiliation. I'm waiting for the dean to approve it, but I'm going to be testifying as an expert witness in a case in Ontario, a pro-life free speech case where they were denied the use of signs. And I need an affiliation because now that I'm a freestyler, I'm not a professor anywhere, it makes me look a little less legit. So I am actually going to be working with the University of St. Thomas School of Law Pro-Life Center as my official affiliation. I often work with Euthanasia Prevention Coalition. I write things for Rehumanize. I'm basically like that Delilah girl on the radio. I'm everywhere all the time. So it's kind of hard to when I don't have one particular niche at any given moment. In fact, I got an email about an article that I wrote that they wanted me to do an affidavit to attest to. And I wrote that article in 2015 or 16. And so, and now I'm testifying in a case in Canada. So it's something like that on a regular basis. As a microfeminist, is it cheating to say that I'm keeping the kids alive that I baked successfully? Because I mean, really, I feel like the most feminist thing I can do is not compromise the motherhood aspect of being a woman in order to do other things, even things that are incredibly noble. So I even thought about trying to go to, my son's in a play tonight. This was scheduled before that. And I even thought about trying to do this from the car so he can go back and forth because he has a speaking part, but realized it probably wouldn't happen. But so as a microfeminist, I'm raising two amazing little humans. And well, I think that's actually my biggest accomplishment in life.
Thank you for being with us tonight, despite your busy schedule. Destiny, do you want to go next?
Yeah, that's an excellent segue. Thank you, Jacqueline, for setting that up because was trying to do everything today and ran out of my son's football game to to do this. It's that thing, you know how like kids used to watch other kids play games on the internet? That's what this feels like because he's normally on the sideline, and so I come to watch him watch other kids play the game of
Aw.
football for 2 hours on Tuesdays, and that's fine by me because he's a little guy and I don't like seeing him get thrown around. So anyway, he already did his part and. I'm so glad to be here. So I'm Destiny Hernandez Rosa. I run New Wave Feminist, which is a nonprofit pro-life feminist organization. Our focus the last couple of years has been specifically on the border with pregnant and parenting migrant mothers in Juarez, Mexico. We, as a secular nonpartisan group, we kind of had this unique opportunity to serve at the border because oftentimes people really politicize that. And, you know, if you're on the right, then you're pro-life, but you tend to be anti-migrant. And then if you're on the left, you're pro-migrant, but anti-life in a lot of ways. And so we just saw a lot of really targeted efforts to coerce women into abortion at the border, especially when they're waiting on asylum. And so if they have been sexually assaulted and become pregnant, it's very easy to sell them on, well, you need to terminate because it's going to be much more difficult for you to have to do paperwork for both yourself and a child. And so why don't you go ahead, you know, this wasn't your choice anyway, let's go ahead and just terminate. And we realized that a lot of women wanted to reject that message, but didn't have the ability to because they didn't have safe housing. Juarez is especially known for femicide, and women, especially undocumented women who are not from the area, are killed regularly there. It's really, really horrific. They're also often exploited into all types of torture porn and things like that because especially if they're mothers, they're extra vulnerable having not just like I think a lot of times, like some of the stuff that they are coerced into doing, if they were by themselves, they would say, you know what, kill me, I'm not going to do that. But when it's, well, I'm going to kill your child in front of you if you don't do it, they're just so incredibly vulnerable. And so we saw a need and thankfully had kind of built up a coalition through the years with New Wave Feminists of people who also had a heart for just human beings. Like that's our thing. This isn't about politics, it's about people and how can we serve the most vulnerable. And right now that is at the Texas-Mexico border. And then some jerk gave us another shelter on the US side. So now we have like 2 shelters that we're running, which is, we hadn't even fully figured out the first one. And then now we have 2, which is a great problem to have because we're able to do that kind of continuity with our moms when they're crossing over and have the emergency shelter on the US side. So anyway, that's what I do.
Destiny, what is your favorite act of microfeminism?
Oh my gosh. Yo, I was not prepared for that question. Hold on, let me stall for a second. Give me one example. What were the other ones?
Well,
Maria is currently pregnant, so that is her favorite act of
like I am growing a girl, so
and Jacqueline is
She is making other women as we speak.
literally.
Yes.
the best form of.
I feel like this is just feminism. This is mega feminism. Like, yeah. So
that's what I said. I
versus
said I only
macro.
ever do macro feminism. I don't know what micro feminism is.
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
always doing it on. I do it big.
on the big. Yeah. Well, I would say my contribution to that. Especially feminism, what it is right now. I hate the fact that when we talk about patriarchy, people think that we're man haters because I don't think that's it at all. I've got 2 daughters and 2 sons. And so I always say that the only brand of feminism that I want to support is one that supports both of them, right? And that creates an equitable society for everybody. And so when I talk about patriarchy, it is not, oh, I hate men, whatever. I love men. I've made 2 men. My body made 2 penises. How does my body even know how to do that? My body doesn't have a penis. That's phenomenal in my brain that I was able to create two men and 2 women. And yeah, I think that's kind of one of the more badass things that we're able to do. But I'm also going to fully acknowledge that it takes a support system and a village to be able to do that. And so it is a luxury and a privilege to be able to be well supported enough that I was able to make those people. And so that's what I fight for now. The hope that every pregnant person will have the same amount of support so that they can do the same.
Well, awesome. Well, we're going to jump right into our questions. So our first question is, what are some common misconceptions that you encounter that people have of the consistent life ethic? And whoever wants to jump in first.
I thought for sure Maria was going to jump in, but
I thought so too, but then you looked up at me Brady Bunch style.
she
You know,
kept it
like,
muted, so it's all right. Well,
I was
I'm gonna
debating.
I'll do mine so
Oh, go
that you
ahead.
can, have more time to word yours perfectly. But I'm sure your answer is going to be great. So the one thing that I've found is, a lot of people. I'm not Catholic. I'm agnostic, but through the years they've compared it to something called seamless garment, and I was kind of unfamiliar with what that was. But people always said, well, that's your reason for watering down the abortion issue. And I guess it's kind of been weaponized in the past a little bit, where somebody says, well, I'm pro-life, and they say, well, what about, the children at the border or children in foster care, or all these other things, right? And so rather than it being something that calls us into action on all those fronts, it's used to basically subdue people on the abortion issue. And one of the things that I think the consistent life ethic has done a really beautiful job at is making it a call to action for all of them, like uplifting all of these issues and showing how completely intertwined they are. That if we start caring about affordable housing and affordable childcare and paid family leave and all of these things, it actually ends up elevating the abortion issue and causes people to actually take us more seriously when we talk about that particular conviction, that the most vulnerable life inside the womb needs to be cared for, because you see that people know that it's not just this fetal tunnel vision type thing. It's not just caring about the unborn child. It's truly like a holistic life approach.
Yeah, absolutely. So Rehumanize, we just had our annual conference this past weekend. And I remember one of our speakers this weekend said that the consistent life ethic is our best secret weapon as pro-lifers in general. And not that it's not, I don't want to minimize it to being just like a tactic of conversation or anything. Like, it is something real, and showing the connection between all of these issues is very important beyond just how useful that is in conversation. But I do think it's true that it helps bolster your argument when it comes to the anti-abortion issue in particular, to show that you really do care about life at all stages, and it's not just going to end at birth there. But I would agree with Destiny that I think the most common misconception about the consistent life ethic that I hear is that it is just an excuse to pay less attention to the abortion issue. Or to try to conflate a lot of things. Ultimately, each of these issues are distinct. They have their own problems. They have their own solutions, but the consistent life ethic really just shows us that they are interconnected in some way. And violence begets violence. We see with so many of these that there's a lot of overlap there. I was just talking with a friend earlier today, strange example, but we were talking about the rise of abortion, particularly post World War II. And it reminded me that I remember learning about how Japan legalized abortion after World War II, in particular because of the atomic bombing and the fact that many women were facing various complications. Their children were facing birth defects. And these issues that were caused by war and nuclear warfare were then bleeding into the abortion issue, because they then decided to legalize abortion for that reason. And so we just see there's so much overlap there. It's hard. You can't extricate one of them out from the others. But it's not just an excuse to try to blur those lines, if that makes sense.
Yeah, sadly though, it can be. And that's why I really wish that we could come to an understanding that there are good faith differences of opinion when it comes to the best way to deal with so many issues that affect human life. Single payer healthcare, gun violence, education. There's anything can basically be a life issue, because every.
Oh no, somehow we lost Jacqueline there.
We lost
Oh
Jacqueline.
no.
Oh no.
I hope she makes it back in.
I hope so.
If while we wait for her to come back, we will move on to our next question, unless anybody has anything else they want to add to that question. Oh, she's back.
Oh, great, there you are.
So weird. But what I want people to know is that you cannot hold a consistent life ethic and believe that it's okay to make people dead. I mean, that to me is the bottom line. We can have good faith differences of opinion on all sorts of other issues, but not on issues that involve one person deliberately killing another person for the sake of killing another person, like euthanasia, abortion, embryonic stem cell research, capital punishment. Those are the issues where, if you're going to be a consistent lifer, you have to be consistently for all of those lives, and they have to have equal weight and equal worth and value to you. And cannot be conflated alongside things that are also important, but not life issues. And so I agree that when done incorrectly, the consistent life ethic looks like a way of just shaming right-wing pro-lifers for not caring about babies after birth, and then trying to shame left-wing people for not caring about babies before birth. When truly, it really, if it's done correctly, is just affirming the idea of human equality that exists for all humans, regardless of circumstances. And when we add all those extra issues in, that's good, because it shows that we also care about life after birth, not just before birth. So it kind of shuts down that misconception. But I just would love it if what qualified somebody to be called pro-life was just they were against abortion and the death penalty and euthanasia. It has been completely turned into, oh, I'm just opposed to abortion and I'm fine with all other forms of violence. And in fact, I even celebrate it. I see that pro-life people celebrating violence and calling themselves pro-life. So consistent life is a way of redeeming the term, because I don't want to call myself a pro-lifer, because I'm not like that. It does not accurately reflect, even though I accurately reflect what it means to be pro-life, that term has been co-opted and doesn't accurately reflect my values. So consistent lifer is just you're consistently against any kind of violence, killing any human being at any stage.
Yeah, I think that's a good clarification to make, because there are definitely, there are consistent life ethic people who are also vegan. There are consistent life ethic people who are passionate in other areas, and there are like tangential issues, but I think it's good to clarify what the core of the consistent life ethic is, which is just opposing the killing of human beings.
Exactly.
Yeah, thank you guys for that. Speaking of interconnected issues, it's Domestic Violence Awareness Month. So we had a question on how does domestic violence and the cycle of abuse affect the choices surrounding pregnancy that women make?
Destiny? They served that one
Yeah.
right up for you.
So obviously, we know that there are women who are going to choose abortion because they don't want to be tied to their abuser. But I would say something that's talked about even less is how often abusers will use pregnancy to keep their victims trapped. And a lot of times, when we talk about bodily autonomy, I always say I believe that your bodily autonomy should exist from the moment your body first exists, right? And so this is something where you should be protected from violence from the moment you first are a living being. But at the same time, I think that outside of that, a person's not pregnant yet. The fact that that's often weaponized by abusers to keep a woman in an abusive cycle is absolutely horrifying. And it's one of those things, especially on a college campus, kind of the call to action that I always tell students, do you know where your local shelters are? Do you know, like, anything a woman in crisis might face? Do you know right now where those things are? Whether that's a food pantry, legal aid if she is experiencing some sort of domestic abuse, if she is, I mean, what I'm talking about as far as forced reproduction, right? Like, that is marital rape. That is a very real thing. So do you know where the resources are for somebody going through something like that? Because you're going to feel much more empowered to help someone when you can actually give them something, when you can empower them with information. And far too often, we know something might exist, but then you're in the moment, you're face to face with somebody who's breaking down, and it's kind of awkward. And if you don't know what to do because you don't have those things already on the top of your head, it can be really difficult to like, basically you're just going to make a situation more awkward, right? And don't do that, because they already have enough on their plate. They don't need that. But if you know what these resources are, that is such a huge way to empower. And I would say also for pro-life clubs, coming up with some sort of document that has all of this laid out, from pregnancy resources to food pantries to sliding scale or affordable legal aid to babysitting services that your club might offer to whatever that looks like. There are probably so many more resources in y'all's community than you even realize, but start doing that exploratory stuff right now and figuring out what that is, and then put it on a website, put it on a blog, whatever, where you can just write an address down, or y'all can get fancy and have cards made, whatever, with like the web address. But then you can just hand this to somebody, because a lot of times in those moments where you have the opportunity to help, you're kind of flustered as well. But if you have it all in one spot, like good to go, then you're much more inclined to actually give somebody resources that they can access and use. And so I would say though that domestic violence is something that's my earliest memories from my childhood. We're watching that happen. And my mom actually miscarried at 5 months because she was in an abusive relationship and lost my brother Joshua because of that. It is very real to me. And so a lot of times I feel like that's an area where pro-lifers and pro-choicers can really work together and have these conversations and acknowledge like the nuance and the gray and all the, Maria, you used the word tangential. I like every time, I was so proud of you when you used it, and I like hope this is recorded and I can go back and see it, because I always want to use that word and I never use it correctly. But one of those issues that are outside of this, like that is we have to have the heart to acknowledge that. And I've seen some pro-life clubs really succeed by inviting the pro-life or the feminist groups in and other groups in to work with them on initiatives like this, like rape kits that aren't being processed in their city. I mean, there's so many ways we can work together to really help women who are in those vulnerable type of situations. And sometimes they are married, sometimes it is a domestic abuse situation. So there's power in numbers, and that's a great common ground place where we can really just have a heart for women and work with others towards a solution.
Yeah, thank you, Destiny. Maria, Jacqueline, do you have anything to add?
Yes. I've, in the past forever, so the past 20 years, 25 years that I've been in the movement, I've noticed an exploitation of hard cases as an excuse for abortion. And where, so where's your heart? This is a woman that was basically told, if you don't get rid of it, I will, direct quote. I'll beat that baby out of you. That's not an uncommon thing for a woman to hear. In fact, a woman is more likely to be killed, murdered when she's pregnant than any other time in her life. When that is exploited as a way when violence against a woman is exploited as justification for violence against her baby, when what they really need is protection for both of them, we have a problem. And so when it comes to any sort of situation, in fact, reproductive coercion is also very, very scary, because I was originally a social worker. My first 2 degrees are in social work. And so I've seen how abusers like to isolate and like to make victims dependent on them. They like to find women that are, already single mothers, and further isolate them. And pregnancy is definitely a tactic that abusers use. All of those across the board. In that situation, a woman does not need an abortion. She needs a place to live. She needs support. She needs help. And that should be something that we can all agree on, and we can work with anyone, regardless of their stance on the abortion issue. And I'd like to see that. I'd like to see more work done across, cooperative work between pro-lifers and pro-choicers. But instead, it seems to be on the pro-choice side. It's just used as a smokescreen to make pro-lifers look bad. Oh, look at what this woman's going through, and you're making it worse, instead of, okay, no, let's work together to make it better.
Yeah. Kind of on that note, on the note of protecting women's dignity, how does an understanding of the inherent dignity of all human beings modify our posture towards policy?
I'm the policy person. So I actually ran for governor in Texas not too long ago, but my doctorate's in in public policy. Can you remind me exactly what your question was?
How does our understanding of the inherent dignity
Inherent dignity. Okay.
Yes.
It basically, if there's an inherent dignity, it's not an idea of what lives are more worthy of protection than others. Because in our current political system, we have this duopoly that says, I will vote for me and I will protect these people that these other side will run over with the bus. And the other side's vote for me and I'll protect the people that would have been run over, but I will run over people of my own. Either way, basically you're trading lives that are not yours to trade. So if we have this concept that, there's inherent intrinsic human worth and it applies to everybody, it's not something that has any sort of gradation, like an unborn baby's life is worth more than someone on death row, for example, or an unborn baby's life is worth more than somebody who is dying and wants euthanasia, who's lived a full life, for example. Another example. If we have a concept of intrinsic dignity, that has to mean equal across the board, regardless of what stage of life someone's in. And it's immutable and it's not in any way changed by circumstances. We have to make policy decisions to prioritize certain things, yes. But we don't need to make policy decisions that trade one life for another. We just can't do that.
And I would also add that, at New Wave Feminists, we talk about the fact that our focus has never been on the legality of abortion. Whether abortion's legal or illegal, people are going to choose to terminate if they're in crisis. And so for us, our policy focus is, what are those policies that actually create a life culture? Like, let's think even bigger. Because to me, Roe is like, that's the bottom rung on this ladder. We could have hopped ahead to a lot of these other things over the last 50 years, like paid family leave and pregnant worker protections. And I mean, there's so many ways, even extending Medicaid. A lot of times we have mothers, especially mothers of color, who are dying at a higher rate, and things like extending Medicaid and their care can help them and their unborn children. And so how do we look at policies? My mom used to always say, it's not enough to be against something, you have to be for something. So what are we being for in this movement? If we're for life, and womb to tomb, you're going to start voting a little bit differently, and a lot of people aren't comfortable with that. But when we really start looking at voting records and policies that we can support, and who are the legislators that are supporting life policies, sometimes they might be somebody who, is a little wonky on abortion, and that's unfortunate. And you have to push them on that. Like, one of the things right now, I'm frustrated with is these legislators that are talking all about abortion access. Like, they're giving, pregnant people a trip to Fiji. Like that, why are we settling for that? As feminists, why are we settling for that? That's bullshit, quite honestly. The fact that we wanted half the pie and then we're like, okay, well, maybe we can just have a piece of the pie.
I think she froze.
I think she did freeze there.
Can you hear me at least?
Oh, there you are.
We
You're
can
back.
hear you.
Ah, okay. I hope I didn't freeze with like a goofy face. I don't even know where my rant left off, but the fact that, probably because I said a bad word and the school's like, no, thank you. And so it froze me. But, that we are settling for the crumbs of equity and equality is so frustrating, because we are saying that in order to, function in society and be a member of society, we will sacrifice our unborn children. We will make the male normative standard that has been set. And when I talk about patriarchy, that's all I'm talking about, not people. I'm talking about systems that were built for men by men. And those systems say you have to have a male, body in order to function in them. And that means you don't carry to term for 9 months, because that might be a strain on your company. And late stage capitalism has decided that you are less productive because you are, choosing the life of your child, and we care about the bottom line. And so there's so much where it is not equitable right now for women to have children in the workforce or in colleges, and we don't have these systems set up. And when it comes to pregnant and parenting students on campuses, especially, like, how many pregnant students are on your campus right now? And a lot of people will say, well, I don't see any. It's not because they're not getting pregnant. It's because they're not getting pregnant and staying pregnant on your campus. That's a problem. So if you're not seeing pregnant people on your campus, then there is a deficiency there and you need to address it with administration. What are we doing for pregnant and parenting students here? My mom got pregnant with me 41 years ago, 1983. I'm 1,000 years old now, I feel like, but it's something where I have not seen much change from the days when she was at University of Texas and had to quit school, move back home, entered into an abusive relationship. It took her 10 years to get her degree. Like there was so much struggle. And I think about now, I've got a daughter who just went to college. Like, what has changed? If she were to get pregnant, like, unfortunately, it would be the same as it was 40 years ago. Like, where are the feminists who say that they're pro choice actually fighting for choice? They're fighting for abortion access. So, again, we can make ourselves basically male to function in society. But I want to see people fighting for policies that actually create the choice where you can continue your pregnancy in school and still succeed. And you don't have to drop out of corporate America or anywhere else.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to echo both of those. And I think just having that basis of recognizing the inherent human dignity also just changes the questions we ask when it comes to each of these issues. When the dignity is no longer in question, I like something that came to mind when Jacqueline was talking earlier. When it comes to the issue of like euthanasia and assisted suicide, I feel like the questions people ask so often lead to solutions, quote unquote, that end up eliminating the sufferer instead of trying to eliminate their suffering, because it feels like, oh, well, they're undignified at this state because they are so dependent. And if we could recognize their inherent human dignity, even in that state, even when they are needy, and recognize that, I mean, all of us needs, we can't survive on our own anyways. No one is totally independent. That just changes the question that we ask. And it shouldn't just be, how can we eliminate this suffering by getting rid of the person? And that would not be a question you would ask at all. And instead it would be, how can we help this person feel valued and feel like they are dignified, even when they are reaching that end? And that goes to any of these issues, I think. Yeah, I'm kind of rambling, but yeah, it just completely shifts the perspective there when you have a solid base of recognizing that our dignity as human beings is not something that can be taken away by any circumstance.
I love that. And I think I'll add our litmus test is violence can never be a part of the solution. So if you take violence out of it, then you actually have to be progressive and push society forward, because once violence isn't an option, you have to come up with real means to the end, right? You have to come up with real solutions for on all of these life issues. And those are the type of policies that we need to be supporting.
So true. So with the election on all of our minds, as it's coming up in the next week, kind of on this topic with violence, how does that make a difference for how we cast our vote? Not necessarily with the candidates, but what things we are thinking through as we are choosing to vote.
May I? May I have
Yeah,
it?
go.
I'd like to say, okay, so for the longest time, before Roe fell and abortion was a state issue then as well. But we have trigger law here in Texas. So essentially, abortion is no longer an issue in our state elections to the degree that it once was. I would go through the ballots and I would look at the likelihood of saving lives versus the likelihood of taking lives for each office. Like, for example, when we had judicial bypass for minors seeking abortions, that was an office, a judgeship that I would want to vote for somebody that identified as Republican, because I would assume that they would be anti-abortion. But when it comes to the Court of Criminal Appeals in Texas, that's where all the death penalty cases are automatically appealed to. I would go Democrat with those. And I mean, I even went so far as local sheriff's races, preferring people of color to people who weren't, because of police violence and brutality and hostility, and hoping that maybe if I elect somebody who's Black, they'll think Black Lives Matter. So I had this intricate set of criteria that I would go through, where I would try to limit the evil that was done and promote the good. Because, so the High Court of Criminal Appeals, their abortion opinions don't matter, but their opinions on the death penalty do. So I had it became highly sophisticated, and people would ask me for it rather than try to figure out all the rationale and just like, okay, who should I vote for in all these different circumstances? I know that you, Jackie, have thought through all these things, and I would give that to them. There comes a point where there are certain things that cannot be held up as acceptable among other things. We can't do a question of, well, how many lives are lost from this form of violence versus how many lives are lost to this form of violence, and choose somebody that supports the form of violence that would kill fewer people. Because what you're doing is you're cooperating with that. There's a point where the lesser of the two evils becomes too evil. I cannot, and I have not been able to vote for anybody who is okay with legal violence toward unborn children. I can't. That's just a deal breaker for me. So I have been voting third party basically since 2012 was my first election where it was just too much for me. That was when it was Mitt Romney versus Barack Obama. And I was really concerned because all of my work at the state level on abortion, we were told that Freedom of Choice Act, FOCA, that he was going to try to put that through, turn it into a federal issue, and undo all the protections that we had done for babies. And I bought into that. Of course, that didn't happen. Bought into that, and I voted for McCain. But when I noticed that we had Mitt Romney campaign out of both sides of his mouths, vote for me and I'll protect unborn babies, but also, I'm okay with abortion in the case of rape and incest as if those babies are any different or any less worthy of protection than the others. I just could not reward that with my vote. That's not something I could validate, even though Mitt Romney would have been clearly a more pro-life choice on abortion than Obama would have been. When we get down to, choosing people because they will kill fewer people, not because they won't kill anybody, we have already spiraled out of control, and we have to stop and just say no. We need to be a part of this. This is so cliche, but a part of the solution and not part of the problem. And so I have to exercise my civic duty, but I cannot vote for anyone that is going to advance the slaughter of another human by choice. Can't do it. So, and I really think that we're gonna finally make inroads when it comes to having a viable third party option when enough people things are a deal breaker and abortion is a deal breaker. Because there's a lot of people that are call themselves pro-life, really don't like abortion, but they also really don't like the idea of mass deportations, and they really don't like the idea of electing someone who committed a violent insurrection and is going to be basically appointed king for life. They don't like the idea of their family starving because of all of the economic policies that are going to happen. They're terrified of Project 2025. Those are legit concerns, don't get me wrong. But we just cannot allow the deliberate killing of people to be held up as something to consider along with any other issue. These have to be dealt with firmly and separately.
Yeah, I would agree. And I think my approach to voting is kind of similar in that when it comes to more local roles, a lot of my consideration is, okay, what is the actual office that they are running for? What capacity will they have to enact their views in various ways? And therefore, how much does it matter if I disagree with them on one issue if they won't have any power to actually do anything about that issue? So that is a big part of it, at least on the local level. And I think it's like, as it gets higher up, and particularly with the presidential race, I would agree. It's like, it's not a purely utilitarian approach to voting. I can't just say, add up how many lives are going to be lost on either side, because ultimately it's impossible to compare that. And so I would say, yeah, when it comes to the presidential race in particular, and those bigger races, I am much more likely to also vote third party and just opt out of the duopoly that it seems like it's just the parties are driving each other to be worse and worse. And so, yeah, I am much less utilitarian, I think, at the higher level than I am when it comes to the smaller local races. Yeah.
Yeah, so I would say that I think Jacqueline's kind of metrics for that is that's a phenomenal way to look at it. And at those down ticket things, we differ in the sense that when it comes to rape and incest exceptions, I view that as a strategic thing, which I know we're not going to agree on, but just like, you know, supporting like a heartbeat bill, which would allow up to 6 weeks, you know, I think that there are times where if we can chip away a little bit at just, not even chip away, that's not the right word, but I think about the fact that if we had eliminated, and I will also say this was back when I kind of thought differently even about Roe and Dobbs, but we would have so much more resources for counseling and stuff for people who had gone through cases of rape and incest, and we could just really provide help for them. But now I'm just at the point where, you know, there's that scene in Jurassic Park where they're like, life will always find a way. And I hate to say it, but I feel like abortion will always find a way. Like it just, if a person is in crisis, if they are in that tornado, I was there, I was 16 years old, my life was over, it was crumbling around me when that second line showed up. Like, if I had not had family support, if I had not had resources like healthcare was such a huge one, because when you're 16, you have no clue how much it costs to have a baby. Is it, you know, $10,000 or $100,000? Like, you don't know. And the fact that I had health insurance was such a privilege and such a luxury that so many people don't have. And then, you know, we look outside of that, DACA recipients don't have access to stuff like that. So if you're a DACA kid who gets pregnant, you can't even access Medicaid for help. And there's so many ways that I think, like, when we start looking, a lot of times it's people on the left who tend to be talking about those issues more. I've been joking lately that I'm just a full-blown anarchist. I hate them all. I don't think that the government's going to save us. We have to save ourselves. Like, I'm not obsessing over this election, quite honestly. It's become the pastime for our nation that replaced religion. People used to talk about religion, now they talk about politics. And it's this cult mentality and this obsession, and it's something that the amount of hours that each of us has spent talking about politics, even me, who I don't want to, but people ask all the time, you know, my stance on things. If the amount of hours that I've clocked doing that, I was working at a battered women's shelter or a food pantry or doing something that really affected people in my community, it would change the world. And I also think when it comes to, you know, I don't know if you guys are getting the million spam text messages right now, like I am, where it's like life or death. Oh my gosh, you have to give me $10 million. Or I'm just gonna, like,
yeah,
I
in a
cannot
state,
freaking.
so absolutely.
I'm in Texas. Take me off your list, bro. Like, why am I getting so many of them? But, you know, thinking about how much money goes to these candidates infuriates me when I know that my local resource centers and domestic abuse shelters and food pantries are like working on such a shoestring that they can't help barely anyone. And especially pregnancy resource centers get a bad rap for being just diapers and wipes. That's all they can freaking afford. If they could afford rent, you know, first 3 months rent, or, you know, helping a new mom buy a car, or these things that are really going to make her not choose abortion, they would do it in a heartbeat because their hearts are there. They don't have the money to. And then you look at all this pro-life money and it's all going into yard signs, being on TV. Like, I don't even know where it's going, but it's millions and millions of dollars. And somebody had a great idea, because I was ranting about it on New Wave Feminist recently, and they said, wouldn't it be cool if all these candidates had to tithe like 10% to the issues they care about, like directly to a charity that was addressing them? And I was like, that alone, their crumbs would be a game changer for when it comes to resources. The amount of hours people are block walking or phone banking or anything, like, I get it, do that, whatever, but don't stop that activism. Just like we say with the March for Life, like, that is the easiest day of activism. You're hanging out with your friends, even though you're like freezing your balls off or whatever, because it's negative 20 degrees in DC. That should not be the pinnacle of your activism. That should be the springboard to get you to do stuff the rest of the year. So no matter how wrapped up and obsessed you are with politics right now, like if you've put any time or money or anything into it, keep that momentum going by now doing it for the nonprofit sector and for the people who actually care about the issues that you're fighting so hard to get legislators to care about.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
Destiny, we should talk because I'm a pragmatist. Listen, I'm a pragmatist. I think people who have convictions, immutable convictions about, I'm not going to vote for anybody that kills anyone. If you don't
Yeah,
make people
I
dead
totally
if you
get
want
it.
my vote. And I used to believe for the longest time that the rape and incest exception was a strategic move to protect the 99% because it took away that one area of leverage by taking away the hard cases. So I really honestly thought that, okay, well, we don't want to make this exception. We're just doing it because it's better to protect the lives we can rather than not protect any at all because we're too purist or whatever. And sadly, that is not the case. Um, uh, it Anytime that there has been a chance to potentially go back and protect lives that were devalued by those kind of compromises, it never happens. In my dissertation, when I did my research, I looked and I said, okay, well, how many damage control policies have been passed with the intention of going back and getting more later, fixing it later? And all it does is re-entrench the idea that we're against abortion because women need to be responsible for their own choices. You made this decision, you made the bed, you should lie on it. And that's not why we're against abortion. We're against abortion because it's violent. But there are people that honestly, that is their ideology. In fact, when I was in college, my dad said, "Oh, well, you can't rape and incest. That woman didn't choose that." I'm like, "Okay, well, yeah, but neither did the baby." And he really it had nothing to do with his convictions about it being a life and that life deserving protection as much as women not copping out and being more responsible and taking, ownership and accountability for their decisions. These are the worldviews that we're dealing with. So the people that are actually passing the laws with those exceptions don't pass those laws with exceptions begrudgingly because they want to do the best they can. That is a decision that's being purposefully made. And I think it is creating its own set of hurdles for us to try to get over later that we never actually can. So I wish as a strategic decision, we could say that we could pass laws that would save 99% of children if we were willing to make that exception, but then go back later. But that's never the case.
Yeah,
We could pass
I think
laws.
that's a good explanation. And I will say again, my opinions have evolved so much because I watch what happened with like even, the abolition of slavery, but then we've found ways to still enslave people, right? Because unless we understand that human dignity, we're going to create a, pipeline and all this other stuff where we're just going to still find a way to lock up the very people because the heart change hasn't happened and the cultural change hasn't happened. So that's where I've gotten to the point again where I think I just don't even want to focus on politics because people are always going to find a way to make that decision. If there was a great Frederica Matthews Green quote, and I'm totally going to butcher it, but she was talking about in nature, in habitats. If you ever saw, it was like birds or something, right? And she said, if you saw birds that were constantly like kicking their young out of the nest and cracking their eggs, whatever, or in animal zoo habitats, if they are ever killing their young, it's because the habitat itself feels chaotic. Something's going on. This is in nature. You wouldn't normally do that. Mammals do not do that to their offsprings, but we have a very sick, broken system right now that no matter the legality, no matter what, if people feel like they cannot survive and this is the end of their life when they're pregnant because they don't have community and they don't have resources, they're going to find a way to terminate no matter what the laws are. And so for me, it's something where it's like, talking about the big idea from 30,000 feet up is fun for us as pro-lifers, but at the end of the day, do you know the people on your block, in your neighborhood, or in your community, or in your dorms? If one of them had a crisis pregnancy, do they know that they can come to you and you're going to lovingly kind of help them find resources and things like that? Because that's the biggest way we make an impact. It's my vote. I'll go do it. I went the other day, the line was really long, and I was like, I don't love America this much. Like, I'm a Texan, whatever, Texas first. But it's something where I I feel like just so often, because this is a cultural pastime now for our nation, we put so much emphasis on that part. And I don't even stand by what I said earlier. I'm just going to throw that out there. Like, I don't, that's how much I don't care about politics now. And Jacqueline, I can't wait to have this argument with you over voice note because it's going to be so good. But yeah, I could not check out harder from politics right now. I'm so burned out on it. Anyway, okay, I'll stop taking up time with this one.
I was gonna jump off that for our next question, because you all mentioned like different ways that you are being active on these issues rather than just waiting for policy to do it for you. But obviously that comes with some discouragements. What are ways that you stay motivated whenever you do face those challenges and people who may not want to hear what you have to say?
I think a big part is finding community, finding people you can go back to commiserate about how tough it is to do this kind of work. That is always super helpful for me, at least when I'm feeling frustrated or burnt out, because you can face a lot of pushback in any of this work, or people who feel like what you're doing isn't making a difference. And so having a community around you or seeking out that community so you can not feel so alone in it is absolutely necessary, and I think very, very helpful in it. That's what keeps me motivated, at least, as well as just, reflecting every now and then, reminding myself of what got me into this work in the first place, reminding myself of the reality of abortion and each of these issues. I think that is also a big motivator.
And Destiny was talking about how March for Life should be the easiest thing you do all year. For years, for the longest time, it was basically my retreat of sorts. It was the way I rallied strength for everything I did the rest of the year. It was kind of like summer camp in a way, and so many good things happened. Pro-life initiatives were launched because we all just happened to be in DC at the same time. But I call those people that call themselves activists because they've gone to a march. There's a term for that. They're slacktivists. They're not activists. They're slacktivists. And activist involves being active. Going to an event, that's cute. That is not active. That is going to an event. And I've never, even though I have the camaraderie and I have long-standing, awesome relationships with pro-lifers, that go back forever. I've known Destiny for like ever. Like, didn't we meet in like 2006? Yeah, I knew her
Probably.
before she was famous. Yeah, I met her outside the Planned Parenthood before she was such a big deal. But I've always felt alone, no matter what. Even when I'm treading alongside, people, especially when it comes to the assisted suicide issue, when it comes to feeding tubes, I wish I could rally those people that that are pro-life and care a lot about unborn babies to care as much about, like we needed a veto in Delaware, or it was going to become assisted suicide was going to be legal there by default if he didn't veto it. He did, but felt very much alone when I was doing that, when I was in that 10-day vigil. Even though I had I was surrounded by people that get it, that get me, it's gonna feel isolating because it's like the world is bleeding, but everyone's acting as if everything's fine. It's kind of gaslighting in a way, in that you see something so, absurdly, obscenely awful, and people are supporting it. It messes with your dissonance. So I actually have a scripture. If that's okay. I'm Catholic. I was actually a Protestant at the time when I got the scripture. I had been counseling a girl in college, trying to get her to choose a nonviolent option for her baby, and she did not. And still hurts, even though that baby would be 20 this year. And I actually sought counseling from my pastor, and he brought up 1 Corinthians 15, verse 58. Therefore, my beloved brethren, be steadfast, immovable, always abounding in the work of the Lord, for nothing you do for the Lord is in vain. And that is basically my mantra. Anything that I do, because there's going to be a lot of disappointments. There've been a lot of times where the feeding tube did not get reinserted, and somebody died an excruciating death over the course of several weeks from dehydration. There have been so many massive, devastating defeats, and it's so easy to ask, why do I do all this? What's the point? Because of all of the disappointments that just naturally come with it. And I have to remind myself that there's nothing that is in vain if you're doing it for God, for the inherent value of that human life. Because anybody that will die or did die or was killed was loved. There's value. Even though I didn't get to save their life, they did not die alone. They did not die abandoned or forgotten. I fought for them. Just because I failed doesn't mean I didn't fight for them. And so I have to remind myself that there's value in just showing up and giving it everything I can, so that they have that witness to their dignity and worth as a human being.
That is so good. Yeah, that's so good. I've never thought of it that way. Even in my agnostic, godless heart, I think that still speaks to it. The fact that, yeah, we've loved and we've cared, and the burnout is super real when you are in this movement and thinking about, you know, dead babies and harmed women, and just all, 24/7 thinking about it. And I always tell people that I don't do New Wave Feminist because I want to do it. I do it because I can't not do it. And there's definitely a distinction in that. Like, this is the thing that keeps me up at night. And so for me, I think efficacy is really important. I think that there have been times in our movement where people have done stuff because it feels good for them, but you're not seeing the results of it, right? And so I want my activism to have success stories and happy endings. And sometimes you go through a drought where you don't have a lot of those for a long time, but then you do. We get the picture from the mom who had a baby at our shelter, and she's thriving, in another state. And it's just hanging on to those and keeping those on my phone, and on those really hard days. Looking at that, I also watch a ton of stand-up comedy, like an abnormal amount, like just because I'm like, I can't take heavy stuff on. I just need to be able to laugh, because the world is so horrifying. I don't watch scary movies because my life's a scary movie. Like, it's too horrifying, the stuff that we see happening, and you can get burned out so fast. But when those sweet moments happen and those success stories happen, and you see people who you got to be a part of helping their life go a little easier or changing their life, like, and it's such an honor. And like, if I can do it, anybody can do it. I'm dyslexic as hell. Like, I failed 7th grade. I went to beauty school. I have no business being in the position I'm in. Like, I am not smart enough to be doing anything I'm doing, and I screw up all the time. But I just show up every day and I keep doing it, and these doors keep opening, and these opportunities to serve keep happening. And being open to the universe in that way, like, I was in a TJ Maxx a couple years ago, and I just kind of said this silent prayer to my higher power, and I was like, you know, use me today if you can. And I get up to the register, and the checkout girl is like, she's laughing with this group of people, and she's like, comes to help me, and she's still laughing, kind of can't control it. And then she goes, sorry, sorry, we were having this whole conversation. They were saying that I'm pregnant. And I was like, whoa, like, do you think you could be pregnant? And she's like, no, I couldn't be pregnant. And I'm like, but could you be pregnant? And she's like, no, I'm definitely not pregnant. And I know that no, because I had that same no. That's what I told my mom at 16. I'm like, you don't understand, the best form of birth control is just really, really, really wishing that you wouldn't get pregnant. And so I knew she was full of it. And I'm like, but is there a chance? And she's like, well, I mean, yeah, there's a chance. Technically, I could be pregnant. And thank goodness, like, I had my card right there, and I slip it to her, and I'm like, if it turns out you are and you need help, you know, continuing your pregnancy, like, I would love to be a part of your support team in that and help you get all the resources you need. And that stuff's heavy, but the opportunities are kind of everywhere when you're open to them. And just being ready all the time, I think is a really cool way for, again, like, that's our homework, and it's not hard stuff. It's just knowing how to help people in the moment and then celebrating the victories when they happen.
And you know what? The opportunities will find you. I carry pregnancy tests and fetal models in my purse because random people will just tell me that they're pregnant. But you're right about anytime you have a victory, anything that you can cling to, that you can hold on to. But I didn't realize until 15 years later. I used to say that I was the worst sidewalk counselor ever, because I never had a single turnaround at the late term abortion mill here in Dallas. It was designed in a way where they didn't have to walk past you. No one could talk. And I hated going out there. God, I hated it. It made me nauseated. And I was indignant that I had to go out there. But the reason I went out there was Papa Joe. Oh, man, I want Destiny to hear this. She'll come back. But Papa Joe Scheidler, may he rest in peace, who was the founded the Chicago Method of Sidewalk Counseling, was talking about how, every baby that dies that day was loved. Just by you being there, you were witnessing to the dignity of their life. And so I had to go because that in itself was mandated. I couldn't let those babies be slaughtered without at least trying, right? Without at least going. And so, I used to think, oh, I was a total failure at sidewalk counseling, but I was not a failure at loving them. And I didn't realize until I was thinking about it, a couple of weeks ago, that by going out there, even though I had no reasonable belief that I was ever going to actually see a success story or a turnaround, that's how I became friends with a woman that worked inside the clinic that wanted out of the clinic. And she later got pregnant, and it was probably would have aborted if she had still been in that environment, because a pregnant woman in an abortion clinic is a bad advertisement. It does not look good. And she would send people to me. So I couldn't, get in there to reach people, but she's like, hey, I know somebody that can help you. So when someone would go to her saying, hey, you worked in an abortion clinic, I'm pregnant and it's a crisis. Well, let me hand you over to a friend of mine. And so here I am for years, just thinking I was the worst sidewalk counselor ever, never saw a save. I can count several babies that I know that I've held that probably wouldn't be here if I hadn't gone out there to fail every Saturday. So it's just a reminder that you might not even see the fruit of it to hang on to it, but it doesn't mean that it's not there. That there's value in doing it for the sake of doing it. And it was so cool when I thought about this the other day. I never even considered that I could not get to women to give them options. So the worker came out to me, like God made a way. And hi, baby. Sorry, kids are home. I'll mute. But so you have to hold on to the reason that you're doing it, and that reason is worth doing it. And otherwise, you wouldn't do it. Otherwise, you wouldn't do it. Hi, baby.
That also reminds me of a story recently of one of the local sidewalk advocates here. because I've been getting more involved with the sidewalk advocacy here in Atlanta. And one of our pro-life advocates was out there, and she had a woman come by and stop and approach her. And it was a day that the clinic was closed, or like during the time of day that the clinic was closed, but she just stopped out there with her husband. They were going to pray a rosary and then go home. And a woman stopped in her car and came up to them and basically told them that, I know it wasn't you specifically, but I just want to let you know that like my granddaughter is here today because I found out my daughter was pregnant. We thought about going to the abortion clinic. And then I thought about you people who stand out here with the signs. And she was like, and I just knew that this wasn't the right choice for me to make for my granddaughter or for my daughter. And it was just like, even the knowledge that there is somebody standing out there was what motivated her to actually support her daughter throughout her pregnancy. And, she was so grateful for her grandchild now. But like you said, we might not ever hear those stories. I mean, it's great when we do get a chance to hear those. And I agree with both of y'all that when we do get to hear the rare success stories, we definitely need to cling to those. I have a folder on my computer and my phone of just like motivational things, like those little wins that definitely help when you're feeling down.
All right, well, we're going to have one last question, and then we will let you all go, let you get to your family, Jacqueline. And Destiny, you're still sitting in your car, so. But we just wanted to make sure to ask, what can students who are in college right now, such as ourselves, be doing to, support a consistent life ethic?
I mean, what you
Maria,
are doing,
I think you're the youngest.
fair.
I think
I graduated college
closest to
7 years ago now. So, but
last time I was a professor was 3 years ago, so it's a toss up. But I taught grad school. We didn't have like a pro-life organization where I was. Maria, I love what you did at Alabama. So
thank you.
I
mean, I think the biggest thing is what you guys are doing, talking about it, starting conversations on campus, I think is the biggest thing, because if you don't bring it up, who else is going to, basically? So I think starting these conversations and making connections with other local advocates, whether it's on the abortion issue, reaching out to local sidewalk advocates and creating a relationship there, and the local pregnancy centers, or if it's I'm not sure what the situation is on the death penalty in your state, but reaching out to other advocates that are in the vicinity, making those connections, bringing them to campus to speak, and just helping to introduce your fellow students to each of these issues and getting conversations started about them is the biggest thing you can do, I think.
May I piggyback on that? If we don't have a vocal pro-life response, it seems that the default becomes pro-choice, where it's, unless there's someone speaking out against it, it's almost assumed that this is the enlightened or educated way of looking at this issue. That's why it's really important to make sure that you have a vocal pro-life response at your university, and also make sure that vocal pro-life response is not connected to any other ideology or party or anything else, because that just makes it worse. So it's important to have letters to the editor. It's important to have demonstrations, because when we allow something to continue without protesting it, we're basically giving it our okay, we're condoning it. And people don't seem to realize why they should be opposed to slaughtering unborn children, unless there's a reminder that this is not okay and why it's not okay. And also, pro-life groups of college students, typically the college age, 18 to 22, in that area, it's amazing how much help you can give just by being a source of labor. We built baby beds once. We've, would do babysitting at the pregnancy center. There's so many things that we did because, we didn't have families of our own. We were young. And there was a lot of us. And so we were able to serve in a way collectively and that we couldn't have done otherwise. And you want to harness that. You want to leverage that and take advantage of it because, when you're post-grad, you can still volunteer and such, but it's not the same as the power you have when you do it as a group. So find a way to serve, find a way to speak out, and hopefully that'll keep going even after you're out of college.
And then my answer is a little more vague. Be cool. Like, don't be weird. Don't be a weirdo. If you're a weirdo, people aren't going to listen to you. If you are a weirdo, do like a psyop thing and say that you're like part of the Planned Parenthood group on campus. Like, make them look bad. If you can't control being a weirdo, then at least work for the other side. But really, you're a double agent. You're working for us. I think being a normal person and not super strange, hello, baby, not being super strange is super effective and powerful. Like, are they going to come up and ask you, like, oh, cute hair, where do you get your hair cut? Or where'd you buy those jeans? Or, hey, do you have advice? I might be pregnant and I'm scared, right? Like, those are all things when you're not weird, people will talk to you about. But if they think you're going to switch over and be weird the second they say something like, and here's the thing, I'm also going to tell you, I have so many people float their abortion stories to me. Like, that is just something they know where I am. I'm not weird about it. They know where I stand, but they will share their abortion stories with me because they know that I'm not going to judge them, that I'm going to focus on the systems that unfortunately made that seem like a desirable option or a necessary option, even worse at the time. But I'm also a lot of times the only person in their life who's going to validate the humanity of their unborn child because their pro-choice friends aren't. They're going to say, oh, it's just tissue, or 1 in 4 women, it's not a big deal. Whereas I'm going to recognize the human dignity of their unborn child, which a lot of them need that. And so don't be surprised if you are vocal, if people share those stories, and be prepared to give them whatever they need in that moment, non-judgmentally. And sometimes that means you cry with them, and sometimes it means you help them get into recovery programs for it. But just be there to listen, and go out with one of your pro-choice friends and have coffee, and I will challenge you to listen more than you talk, and ask them why they're so passionate about supporting Planned Parenthood, or why they're so passionate about this political candidate or whatever, and truly hear them, not to argue with them, not to try to convert them or win them over. But my best activism has come from having a lot of pro-choice friends. And maybe that makes me a terrible activist because I haven't changed a lot of them, but they have made me so much more compassionate, and they have shown me the huge flaws we have in the pro-life movement, places that we need to address because women and children are falling through the cracks when they're not being addressed. And they've been some of the most invaluable people in my life. So I would highly encourage you guys to not just stay in the silo of pro-life thinkers, but challenge yourself. I promise you're not going to go the other way because you understand the science and biology behind a new life. You understand the human dignity of the unborn and how abortion hurts women. It is going to make you more compassionate and empathetic, though. And I have yet to have that be a bad thing for me. So I would highly encourage you guys to do that. And thank you guys so much for having us on this panel. This has been a really great conversation.
Thank you, Destiny. Thank you so much for saying that. I still am friends with the president of the pro-choice group, and I am a class of 2003. So 20, yeah. In fact, we worked together for free speech issues on our campus, where we felt that the dean was being unnecessarily needing to vet what we were doing, and we didn't like it. So we worked together to bring that down. But I've had people reach out to me just because, like, I know you're a passionate pro-lifer. I know how you feel about what I did, but everyone's just telling me that I should write, I should get over this or whatever. I feel like you're the only person I could talk to that would understand what I'm going through. I have enduring relationships that started that way. And my friend that I met when she worked at the abortion clinic, I don't know if she's pro-life now. Didn't ask. It doesn't matter. I wasn't out to convert her. So she might be, she might not be. I know that she gives me all her hand-me-downs for my kids, which is kind of cool. So when you're not worried about winning anybody and like keeping score in any way, and you just want to love people, then people will trust you. And that's when I believe that you can really forge relationships. And I think that maybe people have been converted because of that. I don't know if they have or not because I don't ask. But I know that she would not have sent people out of the abortion clinic to me to help them if she didn't know that I was not weird.
And think
That
about
I-
it. Our goal as pro-lifers is to humanize human beings from womb to tomb. And so the first human being that you get the opportunity to humanize is that person right in front of you. Whether they're screaming in your face at a protest or whatever, show them that you see their humanity. Because a lot of times people are too empty. If they don't feel their own humanity, then they're not going to see it for any other, subset or marginalized group. And so there is an opportunity every single day to humanize a ton of people that we come into contact with, even those who disagree with us, and especially those who disagree with us.
Wow. Thank you guys so much for joining us tonight. And thank you for sharing your thoughts with us. We really appreciate it. So
Thank you
Thanks
so
so
much
much
for
for
having
having
us
us.
here.
Thank you. This was nice.